I'm Susan Birch, and welcome to another A Health Detective podcast. Today, I'm introducing you to Doctors Leon and Tamora Bynoe. Leon is an ophthalmologist and Tamora is an anaesthetist. I think they call it something different in the States. I'll let her share that with you. Okay. They have a very interesting but quite a common story to talk to you about today. Which is from their journey from being overweight, having high blood pressure, and having some other health problems, back to the glowing and robust health that you see today. So I'll let them share their story, and then we'll get into some questions we have about it. So thanks so much for coming along. Wonderful to see you. And yeah, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you're up to.
Okay. I'm Tamora Bynoe. I'm an anesthesiologist. That's what we call an anesthetist here in the States. We live in South Florida, and we've been in South Florida since 1999. 1999, that's correct. Our journey in terms of low carb mirrors what everybody is. You know, we grow up eating this, what we call the standard American diet, which is filled with processed foods, high sugar, seed oils, grains. And when you're young, you could get away with it. I was, I'm tall, 5'9", and I was skinny my entire life, ate whatever I wanted to eat. And to my credit, I was actually doing intermittent fasting when I didn't even know what intermittent fasting was. And I think that allowed me to maintain a weight for a long period of time. But as schooling, kids, raising children and having your children eat, standard American diet food, and as you get older, it will catch up with you. And that's what it did for us. By the time I was in my mid 40s, that's when the skinny Tamora became the plump Tamora. And in my case, it was the TOFI, the thin on the outside, fat on the inside. My limbs, arms, and legs, nice and skinny, but I started developing a little belly. My blood pressure was going up. I was feeling bad. I was developing reflux. I was having recurrent urinary tract infections. I was having hip pain, just generally, I just did not feel good. I don't know if Leon wants to talk about what he was experiencing.
Well, my story is a lot more dramatic than that. Yeah. So my name is Leon Bynoe. I'm a retina specialist, ophthalmologist. I specialize in retina. And I would say that I actually did much better than the standard American diet for most of my life. I would say that for most of my life, probably even before I knew what they were, I was following the dietary guidelines.
And I will admit that he was not eating any, with the young kids, I was the one who was taking them to the McDonald's or to get the pizza. He would not go that. I've known him since 1984. He's never put a donut in his mouth.
She's never seen one. Yeah. So I figured out, because I was a fat kid. So when I was 15 years old, I figured out that there were certain I figured out by that time that white carbs made me gain weight. So I had already sort of figured out to not eat so much like bread or rice or potatoes and stuff. Okay. And so when I was 15 years old, when I was a freshman in high school, of course, not liking being the fat kid, I used diet and exercise, calories in, calories out, the standard stuff they tell you to do. And I did drop 40 pounds the summer of 1980. And for most of my adult life, I was able to use calories in, calories out, diet and exercise to sort of stay in shape or around being in shape. And what I found as I got older is that, I'll call it DE Chico, just so I don't have to keep saying that. But DE Chico basically works until it stops working. Okay. But everyone as they get older and you're in your 30s, you sort of start gaining a little weight, but you can still diet and exercise and get back in shape for that beach trip that you have coming up, or for the wedding photos that you might want to take and look better in. But what you find as you get older is that DE Chico, basically that weight, that shape that you can get back into, gets the weight keeps going up. Okay, so by the time I'm in my 40s, I can get in shape, but not like I was able to get in shape in my 20s or 30s, right? And I just figure, oh, I'm getting older. And again, I sort of already figured out to avoid like the white carbs, okay? But one thing I did do is I ate a lot of fruit, and I'll come back to that in a moment, because as it turns out, that is what made me very overweight. Anyway, so to cut to the chase, I was going on like most people, just thinking, okay, well, I'm getting older, I'm getting to my 40s, I'm getting to my 50s, so I'm gonna have a belly, because everyone does, right? But then when I was 52 years old, I had a pulmonary embolus, okay? Clot had formed in my right leg, and I ignored it for months, but I was like, I'm a runner. I've been running since I was 17 years old. I would run like 4 to 6 miles per day. And I found that when we had gotten back from a trip to Europe, during that summer of 2017, I'd be out running, and I'd just have these acute episodes of shortness of breath. Okay. And because doctors are the worst patients, I was just like, oh, I'm just getting older. Right. But then on October 6th, 2017, I was doing some stretching exercises, and then my right calf swelled up a lot, and I became short of breath. And I was like, then I knew what had been going on for the last few months. And I guess this clot was the bigger one. So and stupid me, I was going to go to work and see patients, and then play tennis, and then go to the hospital. But I told Tamora, I said, my leg swelled up. And she was like, you have to go to the emergency room now. And I'm like, I'm okay. Anyway, so again, thankfully I'm married to her, 37 years, because I'd probably be dead now if I wasn't, for a lot of things. But anyway, so I went to the hospital, and they find that, yes, I have a pulmonary embolus. I had already figured it out by that time. But yes, and it was pretty bad. And probably the reason why why it wasn't like a big one is because, I was someone who was running every day, and I had very high lung capacity, but apparently it was all over my lungs.
Is it both lungs, multiple lobes?
Yeah. So October 17th, 2017, I'm 52 and a half years old. And I'm wondering, why did I follow all these dietary guidelines? I ate the healthy grains. I ate a lot of vegetables, a lot of fiber. I mean, I absolutely hate broccoli, but you wouldn't have been able to tell it because I ate so much of it, because I was doing it because
he would fill up his plate first with broccoli or spinach,
right?
Or
whatever. Because I thought that was what I'm supposed to be doing.
And then he was eating fruit all day, all day.
And we were eating chicken all the time, steak every once in a while. And if we did, it was lean meat. So I was following these guidelines. And this is why this is very personal to me, because a physician couldn't say to me that I did it wrong. Okay. I knew for a fact that I did not do it wrong. Mm-hmm. I wasn't, I followed diet and exercise, calories in, calories out, healthy grains, their heart healthy oils. Yeah. We didn't eat a lot, we trimmed the fat and all that stuff, and use their heart healthy corn oils and all that stuff. Did all that stuff. And I end up 52 years old with a potentially life-ending disease.
Hypertensive.
And I was hypertensive.
And you're about like 60, 70 pounds heavier.
Yeah. So how do I end up obese, hypertensive, with a pulmonary embolus despite following these dietary guidelines, which I know I did right? Okay. And so first I'm recovering from this, October 2017. So the next couple of months I'm on blood thinners. And I'm trying to figure out, well, I guess I'll try and lose weight and stuff. But I was like, I've been doing this my whole life. How come? What's going to be any different about if I do diet and exercise, calories in, calories out, and lose weight this time? I mean, what's going to be different? What's going to, or when will I just gain it back again? Will it just be a constant yo-yoing of fitness like it's been basically my whole life? Okay. All right. So then, and I'll turn it over to Tamora, because she's actually the one who started us down this path. So I'll let you go because I think it was January 2018. So at January 2018, I'm 2 months into my pulmonary embolus. I'm on blood thinners, and
These are antihypertensive.
Antihypertensive.
He feels crappy.
I feel like an old man at
Yeah.
52
Yeah.
and a half, despite a lifetime of doing everything the doctors say you're supposed to do.
And keep in mind that we're both physicians. We both went through medical school, and we still did not know what we were supposed to do to maintain our health.
Right. Well, we know what we were taught.
Yeah, we know what we were taught, but obviously we knew it wasn't working.
Wrong.
See, in Leon's case, yes, he was eating healthy. I knew in my case, I was eating not that healthy. I work in outpatient surgery centers where in the doctor's lounge, they have the worst foods.
Oh.
Jelly donuts, bagels, chocolate. I mean, and I was partaking.
This is a place of health.
Right.
And this is what they're serving the
Yeah.
people who are supposed to be taking care of your health.
Sodas, they give us sodas. And the thing is, I had a 2 jelly donut minimum. I had they would slice the bagels in half, and I'd be like, oh, I just have half a bagel, always knowing I was going to go back and get the other half of the bagel. And every time, I finish a surgery and we dropped the patient off in the recovery room, there was a little jar of chocolates, and I was like, oh, that's my reward. So I knew he was eating well. I knew I was eating poorly, and I knew I was feeling really bad. I'd go
The
to
hip pain and the
the hip pain. And again, I was 30 pounds heavier than I am now at that point as well. And again, my weight was all in my belly. The thing that really, I would change my life around food. Like, for example, we wear scrubs in the operating room. And to hide my belly, I changed the scrubs to like an empire waist scrub. So instead of tucking it into my shirt, into my pants, the waist was high, and so I could hide my belly. Outside of work, I have big purses, and I always had my purse holding in front.
She's very strategic.
When I sat down, I have my purse in front of me. We enjoy playing tennis. I would be wearing girdles to wear a tennis out. So that's.
Oh, also remember when the late pregnancy?
Oh my God, yes. We went to a party. It was a graduation party for the daughter of a friend of ours, and we ran into friends we hadn't seen in a long time. And the dear friend he hadn't seen in a while came up to me to congratulate me on my pregnancy. And that was, oh my God, that was like, I was mortified. I knew something had to change. And the one thing I stopped, again, I was having recurrent UTIs. I was having reflux.
The reflux, yeah.
I was on Nexium for my reflux. I was having this hip pain. I just cut out all the food. I mean, just cutting out food eating at the hospital or at the outpatient surgery center. I cut out the chocolates. I cut out, just cold turkey. And just by that, I lost 10 pounds. Just by not eating that stuff, I lost 10 pounds. And then one day, Leon had his pulmonary embolism in late 2017.
October, yeah, and January 2018.
And again, being tall and skinny, I had never really been on a diet. I really didn't know how to diet. I started doing, I tried to do the calories restriction. I restricted my calories to like 1,200 calories a day.
Counting peanuts.
I was like counting everything, and I did lose weight. And it came, I lost weight, and then, I lost weight. I was riding the stationary bicycle, which I hate, but I was doing that because I'm only eating 1,200 calories. I have to expend more than 1,200 calories so I can lose weight. And I lost weight, but as soon as I reached my goal,
slowly came
right back up.
Right.
So one day I'm in my the doctor's lounge in between cases, and the television was on, and there was it's one of these early morning shows, and it was a presenter. She had someone who had lost weight using intermittent fasting. This is
the first we hear.
And I'm like, oh, what's intermittent fasting? And, I just sit there and watch it, and it was someone who she stopped eating at 6 o'clock in the evening, and she didn't eat again until 10 a.m. And I was like, that's interesting. As I said, since high school, I had cut out breakfast, and I was like, intermittent fast, that's easy. I can do that. I could do that. And it was January of 2018. It's like, right. What do I have? I'll just try it. It's easy. And so, and the thing is, I was not someone who ate breakfast, but I was late evening snacking. That was so funny when I closed my window, and then I realized, oh wow, This is when I'm eating my popcorn and all my little junk food. And I said, okay, well, it was hard because I was so used to the snacking at night. But I stuck with it. And then all of a sudden, even though like the weight didn't really drop off a lot, but what went away, the reflux just went gone. It just disappeared. And I was like, wow, the hip pain that was really, I mean, it was painful to sit down and get up. So sometimes I would just stand because I didn't want to sit down for the fear of the pain of getting up. Getting in and out of my car was really bad. I almost once had one of my colleagues inject me with steroids because of pain, but I was like, I don't want to do that. And interestingly enough, brushing my teeth, when I always brush my teeth, my gums would bleed.
And that went away.
Right. 100% when I flossed, my gums would bleed. 70% of the time I brushed my teeth, my gums would bleed. Just disappeared.
Vanish.
And those were like,
just from intermittent fasting.
That was just intermittent fasting alone.
You hadn't changed anything.
I wasn't really, I had stopped all the junk food in the hospital.
Right.
But just intermittent, and then it was like all that other stuff that I was not expecting just went away. And then I realized that's all the inflammation leaving my body.
Right.
And it was sort of, we had gone away for another trip.
Right.
We went to Europe. And then during the trip, when we were sightseeing, we went to Europe and we went to, beautiful places. And when we get back to the hotel, I would go on YouTube and just look up, about more intermittent fasting. And every time I saw intermittent fasting, keto would come up. And at first, so I'm looking at keto, I'm like, this is crazy. I can't do this. You just eat fat? That's ridiculous. And then that's all the training.
And that's the other thing. I mean, the fat phobia.
The training.
It's just ingrained.
It was so
ingrained.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you get a steak. Oh, it has to be lean meat. Oh, you trim that fat over. It's almost like in your mind, you feel like if you eat that piece of fat that's on the steak, it's going directly into your bloodstream, right to your coronary arteries and lodging it. So, I mean, that's like, that's how it feels in your mind because it's just been drummed into you for decades now. But go on, I'll let you.
So I go home and watch these YouTube videos and then started looking at keto. And at first I'm like, this is crazy, absolutely crazy. But then I found people like Dr. Ken Berry,
Jason
Fung,
Paul
Mason, and then the science. And that's when you hear the science about it. And then again, going back to my training, it's like, the science is accurate.
It makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And it also made me think back to many after the birth of my son, briefly doing Atkins.
Yes.
To lose weight. And
and it worked.
And I lost weight. Mm-hmm. And I remember when many years ago when I did it, my son's now, he's almost 23 years old. And I was reading, I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
You don't eat carbs, you don't spike your insulin, you don't store fat.
Right.
It made sense. And then I completely forgot about it. And then here we are, 20 something years later. And when we came back from the trip, I said, you know what? I'm going to just try. I can try it. It's not going to kill me, or will it? Again, it was that. And at first, when I came home, it was just me doing the keto diet.
Oh, I started the intermittent fasting.
He started intermittent fasting
because of what you told me.
Right.
And just how you said all these things happen. I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. I'll try it too. We're going.
So I started the keto diet, but again, I was so scared of fat. So at first, all I could do is eat avocados.
Yeah.
I'd have a salad with avocado. Okay. And then I'd have a little cheese, slowly. And the weight started to come off. And I wasn't hungry.
That's the big thing.
Yeah, I wasn't hungry.
That's the big thing.
Was eating, the food was full of flavor.
Butter tastes way better than soybean oil.
Yeah.
Way better. I mean, I'm like mad at the world that how many decades I wasted. Right. I could have been having butter instead of freaking Wesson oil.
No, yeah, and then we could. But
go on.
Yeah. So and the weight started coming off, and then what I found, because we live in South Florida, the weather is beautiful all year round. The neighborhood that we live in is full of greenery, nice trails. And we've been in the house we've been in since 2003.
Yeah.
And during the entire time, I've always in my mind said, I should go out for a walk. But I always like, I'm tired, I don't want to do it.
Right.
And then that 2018 is finally like, I'm going to go out and have a walk. And then all of a sudden I'm out walking.
Right.
It's like, I didn't have the energy. So it took away all the inflammation. It gave me energy that I need to go out and walk and see this beautiful neighborhood that I live in. And so for the first time since 2003, I had the energy to go and walk, and I went and walked, taking 5-mile walks, feeling good, losing weight, eating great food. And then, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so anyway, all right.
Because I want to talk about how I found lean mass hyperresponders.
Right. So Tamora is doing really well. And by this time, as I said, I've already had this conversation with myself that what I was doing had to be wrong, even though I knew I was doing it right. And this is actually a very sore spot for me, because I feel that there are a lot of people who they end up following what the doctors say to do. They end up in crappy shape, and then the doctors make them feel bad about themselves because, oh, well, you just didn't do it enough. You just didn't do it well, and that is really, and it's like, no, we've been giving them the wrong advice, the wrong information for decades. Now, yeah, there's some people who just eat a lot of it, but I wasn't that person. I was doing all the things. And that's why it actually gave me a tremendous amount of sympathy for, that I didn't have before for people who are overweight and stuff. Because I was like, well, if I ended up this way, with a BMI of 30, that I'm the 6 feet and I was weighing about 230. If I ended this way and I know I did everything right, then how can I not be sympathetic to someone else who doesn't have the knowledge that I have, So anyway, so I'm watching all these great results with Tamora. So I started doing it too. I started doing intermittent fasting. And because I'm kind of one of those do it to death type people. So like if I get, like, for example, when I ate broccoli, I ate broccoli. I mean, it was like the whole, and I didn't even like it. I used to eat fiber up the wazoo, like bran and all this stuff. And again, it's not because I like this stuff. It's because, this is supposed to be good for me. So what, I do things to change. So what I saw Tamora doing so well, dropped weight, looked great, was healthy and all. So I started adopting these same things. And of course, I'm watching all the same videos. I'm watching Paul Mason and Gary Taubes, Nina Teicholz, people who just really did what we never did as medical students. They read the papers,
right?
We now, and I mean, to the medical students' defense, they're just bombarding you with all this information, and so you're just like. I mean, no one's going to have the time to actually go read and see, is what our professor told us actually what the paper says. But thanks science that there were people who actually did that, who actually went, like Paul Mason. I saw this talk where he shows, they said they make a statement, they cite 6 sources. Turns out 3 of the sources didn't even measure what they were saying, that they cited. And the other 3 just clearly didn't show what they were saying. And this is the kind of medical education we had. We were told by thought leaders what the science says, and then we come to find that no, the science never said that. Okay, and of course, I don't want to take too much time because the story is out there now, thankfully. But I mean, a lot of it was intentional deception to sell, statins and what have you. Okay, but anyway, so I'm starting to do this stuff, and I start the intermittent fasting, and yes, I start dropping weight. I watch a video by Gary Fettke, I think it was, is fruit good for you? Yeah. And this was like, I was like, of course it's good for you. All right. Because of course I learned it in medical school. It's natural, it's plant-based, it grows in the ground. So of course it's good for you. But I'll watch this video anyway. And I watched the video and I was like, this just makes perfect sense. I mean, the things that stood out to me from this is that natural doesn't equal good, because what's natural now actually literally didn't exist for 99% of human history. I mean, like the fruits, you think it's natural and all, but the fruits that humans had access to prior to agriculture is nothing like what we have in our supermarket. What we have in our supermarket is a product of humans being clever beings and not wanting to eat corn that tasted like straw, and figuring out how to turn corn from this basically piece of straw called teosint into this luscious, carb-loaded but delicious tasting thing that we have now. Problem is that it's natural, but it also, this amount of carbohydrates will spike your insulin. And so basically after watching the Fedke video, this made more sense than anything I'd learned in medical school, because I was like, of course, we evolved to make insulin for survival. So we were supposed to be making small amounts of it, and we weren't making it all day long because no one is that good a hunter or a gatherer that they could be eating 3 meals a day with snacks in between. So that's why we even make insulin in the first place. And when I see this, is fruit good for you? And his conclusion was that, well, maybe not, because it makes you make a ton of insulin, and then making a ton of insulin, doing that frequently is almost certainly one of the biggest drivers behind why we have metabolic syndrome. And I would say go further, even all of the diseases of civilization. And Chris, I have to give a shout out to Chris Nobby, who's also an ophthalmologist, who has done some brilliant work looking at indigenous populations and finding that you have populations consuming their ancestral diets that are high in saturated fat, like the Maasai tribe of Africa. You have ones that are consuming diets that are very high in carbohydrates, like I think the Tuca of Papua New Guinea, where they eat a ton of sweet potatoes. But both of these populations, they don't get hypertensive and diabetes and obese or cancer. Okay. And what the thing they have in common is they don't have our vegetable oils. Okay. So I'm just saying, but these kind of things where you're really looking at what does the science, what is it telling us? And what makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint? And it just all made such perfect sense. We make insulin for survival, not to be pouring it out in enormous quantities 3 to 6 times a day, every single day of our life. That is why everyone, even from the couch potato to our world's greatest athletes, by the time they're 40, they have a belly, okay, or into their 50s. That's why Michael Jordan, one of the icon basketball player, he's not obese, but he has a belly. He has a dad bod right now, and that's why. I mean, you can sort of get away with it when you're young, but when you get older, it's going to catch up to you, because we were not supposed to be pouring out insulin morning, noon, and night in these quantities that we're doing it. So anyway, after watching that video, is fruit good for you? I said, okay, I'm going to do next 30 days. I'm not going to eat any fruit. And mind you, I was someone who was like, I was eating, because even though I hated broccoli, the fruit I was eating was, it was like pineapple, mango, kiwi. All
grapes.
Just the nature. I was eating all the nature's candy. Okay. But after watching the Fedke video, I said, okay, next 30 days, I'm just not going to eat fruit. Let's just see what happens. And I dropped so much body fat just from that. And so that was like the first time I did a diet trial. And I learned 2 things from it. One was that you can pretty much do just about anything for 30 days, It's not, most things are not going to kill you if you do it for 30 or even 60 days. And the second was, after seeing what happened, it made me willing to try other things. Okay. It made me willing to say, okay, well, let me try this for 30 days, And so I've done a series of diet trials and finding out what works best for my body. Okay. And so anyway, dropped a lot of body weight. So this would have been around the summer of 2018. And then maybe a few months later, Tamora, using me as a guinea pig, she had been watching some videos about carnivore. And so she said, hey, why don't you try carnivore? And I was like, okay. And I don't know, it was funny. It was like, you didn't want to do it, but I was like, by this time I had in my mind, it's like, well, 30 days of doing that isn't going to kill me. But anyway, when I went carnivore, it was like I was given a new body. I mean, understand, I thought I was healthy, but I was about as healthy as most average sick people are. I would get colds or flu, sore throat, upper respiratory stuff 3 or 4 times a year, every year. And I just thought that was normal. Had chronic sinusitis, allergies, probably kept Kleenex Foundation Corporation in business with all the tissues I'm using. Again, just thought it was just normal allergies, right? Had that my whole life, colds, flu a few times a year. My knees were terrible. And I just thought, oh, it's because I'm in my 50s and I've been running since I'm 17. So yeah, my knees are going because that's just what happens. That's the common. But anyway, I went carnivore and like all that stuff just started vanishing. And it was just like, it was like magic. I mean, the knee pain was just gone. I mean, my knee pain was so bad. I bought a stationary bike that's in my garage now. I don't use it now, but I bought it because I just knew my days of running were coming to an end, you know. And I mean, it was so bad that, like, you know, just sitting down, trying to, you know, in the same position for a while, I mean, it was just killing me. Gone, just gone, you know. And yes, I was losing weight and all, but you know, it was what made it vanish was the change in the diet, no question. And so anyway, so then, so I basically stayed with mostly, I mean, I eat some plant-based foods, but, you know, watching just some other videos about, you know, who did I see talk about lectins? It might have been Paul Mason, or it might have been Fecky, or I've already, anyway.
I think Dawn Baker and Ken Berry, I think they talk a lot.
Yeah. I one of those, you know, one of those heroes, which I call them.
I watched maybe Paul Saladino, perhaps.
He's and just talking about the idea of plant lectins and why plants by necessity, I mean, and it also makes evolutionary sense, are going to rely on chemical defenses a lot more than animals, because plants can't run anywhere. They can't hide, and they don't have claws and can't fight you. So of course they're going to have some defenses. And, you know, so it just seemed to me that I did better with a predominantly animal-based diet. And I did it through trial and error. She started, you know, said, try carnivore, it works well. So I just kept doing it. And then I was pretty fit. Definitely felt a lot better. Wasn't getting sick anymore. I stopped getting sick. My sinusitis was gone. My whole life I had that. I stopped snoring. You know, a whole lifetime of snoring, because I'm not all inflamed up in here anymore. And so all of that just went away. And then I tried a few other things. September of 2019. So at this time, I'm pretty healthy. I'm pretty fit, but I'm vain. And I didn't like, I mean, my physique, it was what we, in the States, we call it a dad bod, you know, not quite fat, but just kind of, you know, like no real musculature, no taper. And I just saw pictures of it. I was like, I want to do better than that. And so by this time I'd already done, with insulin, I'd already cut out the vegetable oils. I was eating natural fats. Right. I was already, you know, doing, I wasn't eating all day long, but I was doing some intermittent fasting, and you know, so I cut the carbs, doing the fasting, but I still wasn't as fit as I wanted to be. So as I said, I would just try things. So there was one variable that I felt I could do a lot more with, and that was time. Okay, so I was already decreased my carbs a lot. I already was eating natural fats, but I thought, well, what if I ate a lot less frequently? What if I had a much lower meal frequency? And the justification for it was, again, from all the videos, from all these people who were displaying the science, and also thinking about it in an evolutionary context, it made sense to me that humans probably spent most of its existence on a very low meal frequency out of necessity. Because again, prior to agriculture, there was no abundance, there was no plenty, there was no stores where you could go just get a meal. So I said, okay, so let me see if there's one last variable to play with. Let me see if I decrease my meal frequency. So, because it was sparked by this photo on Labor Day of 2019. You know, I'm with Tamora, and Tamora looks great. And I look okay, but you know, not really muscular, not really tapered at all. And Tamora just looks, you know, much younger than me. So I mean, she is younger, but not that much younger. And so I said, okay, so frequency. So after Labor Day, after I saw the picture, I said, okay, so I'm going to start doing what I call feast fast. Meaning that no calorie counting, no portion control. Those are out of my vocabulary. I do not do those things. Whenever I eat until I'm full, you know, and if I'm not full, I eat more. Okay. But I decided to really work with the meal frequency. So I did what I call my 5F plan. And it's feast fast with full fat foods. Okay. So got back from the US Open in Labor Day 2019. And then that week, first week of September, I started eating one meal a day. but again, always to complete satiety and always with nutrient dense, nutrient bioavailable, high saturated fat foods.
Real food, no
processed foods, and always to complete satiety. Okay. And I was eating 1 meal a day and also skipping days. So I was actually eating 5 meals a week. Okay. But understand something. I was never hungry. I just wasn't, because when I ate, the kind of foods I was eating, high saturated fat, high nutrient density. So I was getting what I needed. And here's the thing that people don't know. It's a lot of those things where you don't know what you don't know until you've done it. They can't imagine, how can you only eat 5 meals a week? And when I tell them that, everything changes when you do what I was doing. My hormones changed. My satiety signals changed. Okay. I mean, I didn't measure it, but I know that the leptin and ghrelin had to have changed. Why? Because I wasn't hungry. You know, I'm eating 5 meals a week and I'm not hungry, and I'm still running and I'm still working out and I'm doing all this stuff. And yet it was like, I was much hungrier when I was overweight and eating all the time, you know, but that's because that's a different hormonal milieu, right? In that milieu, when I'm eating high carbs, you know, my leptin and ghrelin are probably all out of whack, where it's telling me, even though I've just eaten a meal, you're still hungry. Whereas now my leptin and ghrelin is in the balance where I've eaten this meal until full satiety and I'm not hungry until the next day. Okay. Or even if I skip a day. So I did that. And then I started, you know, getting like very fit, you know, and, you know, people say you work out. I've worked out my whole life. It wasn't the diet. It wasn't the working out. This was all what I was doing. And then in October, I went down to 4 meals a week. So I was skipping 2 days. I was eating one big meal a week. Again, nutrient dense. I mean, no lettuce, no broccoli, none of that garbage. You know, because all that does to me, my mindset was this: is that at least for this trial, when I eat, I have to put in my body the most nutrient dense, nutrient bioavailable, calorically dense food I can get. I'm not going to waste precious stomach real estate on broccoli, on fiber, which I can't digest. Okay, which humans can't even digest. Why am I going to fill my body up with that stuff instead? And it's not going to give me the nutrients I need, which is going to bulk me up, which is going to bloat me and all this stuff. So that was the mindset. And so I was doing 4 meals a week for November. So then by Thanksgiving of 2019, so after 2 months, I had gotten down to 161 pounds, which is a weight I don't think I've seen since I was a fetus. Okay, or all right, maybe a little while after that. But I mean, I hadn't been that lean since like high school, and here it is. I'm like, you know, 55 years old. Okay, so got very lean, very tapered, and everything. All right, and here's the thing: no yo-yo. I mean, I got that fit back in 2019. Now it's going on 3 years, and I've never been out of shape since. Plus, I did some other things. Again, watching videos, looking at the hormones. I saw something. Maybe I think it was Jason Fung, or well, again, one of the heroes was talking about how your human growth hormone spikes with extended fasting. It can spike as much as a factor of 5. So I thought, okay, well, I can take advantage of that. So I already had a very low meal frequency. So what I started doing is I started doing a lot more resistance training, a lot more. You know, like weights and pull-ups and things, but I was specifically doing them in a fasted state. And that's how I actually went from 161 to about what I weigh now. It's about 175 without gaining any body fat. I mean, my waist is the same size as when I was 161, but my chest got a lot bigger. I got more muscular and I got a lot stronger. And so then I also more recently went away from more aerobic running to more I just stopped running. I quit running after almost 40 years of running. I quit in October because, again, one of my friends said, you know, talked about how aerobic running, it's not that it's bad for you, but it might be better to do more resistance training if you want to build more lean muscle.
Especially as you get older,
right.
Muscle is very important. Right.
So I was like, so I said, okay, well, I was playing more and more tennis, and I've become obsessed with tennis, and I love playing it. You know, I'm not great at it or anything, but I just love improving and getting better. And so I said, you know, well, what I'll do is instead of running 5 miles and playing tennis, I'll just play more tennis and do weightlifting and squats and stuff. And I got a lot more muscle mass from that. And I thought that, I'm turning 57 this year, and I thought you couldn't build muscle in your late 50s. I mean, I didn't think that was even possible, but yet I have. And more importantly, I've maintained it, and I'm never out of shape. And here's something, there's never been a 2-year period in my life where I didn't have any colds or sinus problems or, like sore throat. And there's never been a 2-year period in my life since I would say my 20s where I was never out of shape. Meaning that, like everyone else, I was yo-yoing. I mean, I wasn't yo-yoing to a big extreme. I wasn't like going up to, a lot, but I would get in shape, but then I'd be out of shape, in shape, out of shape. And then as I got older, of course, the out of shape just kept getting worse and worse and worse. But for the last 2 years, I mean, when I got down to 161 and got, muscular, and all I've done since then is put on 13 pounds of muscle since then. That's all I've done. I mean, my waist hasn't gotten any bigger. I'm always fit. And here's the other thing. It's like, as I said, it's like I've been granted a new body. I mean, all those aches and pains I used to have that I thought was, I'm just getting older. They're just gone. It just, we played tennis for over an hour today, and I'm running around the court and all. And yes, I mean, I'm tired, but I'm not aching. Whereas in my old life, it was basically, I played tennis like this. It would be 800 milligrams of ibuprofen just to get out of bed the next day.
No, we would have to take, at least me, before we play tennis, I'd take 800 milligrams before I played, and then play, and then I take more when I woke up, because it was just
yeah. And when we're playing on a hard court too,
right?
So I mean, I'm just saying, it's like, and what this journey has taught, I think, both of us, is that there are so many things that you just take for granted, or that you just accept as true. You just accept that this is how things are. I just accepted that, my knees are supposed to hurt because I'm in my 50s and I've been running my whole life.
And your doctor tells you that as well. You go to the doctor and he goes, well, what do you expect? You're getting older. Like,
Right. And then I just thought, everyone's supposed to get sick, once or twice a year, because it's flu season, right? And now it's like I'm never sick. It's just amazing to me that going into my late 50s is when I don't get sick at all. Now is when my joints don't hurt. With COVID, we were both exposed to COVID before the vaccine came out, because we were still seeing patients. I was exposed twice, and never had even a sniffle, nothing. And the thing is, before I was doing this, I absolutely would have because I was like everyone else, I was getting flu and cold and stuff. So of course I would have gotten sick.
I tested positive for COVID.
You didn't get sick at all?
I had a stuffy nose, and that was the extent of, I had a stuffy nose for about 3 days.
Yeah, I didn't even get that.
Yeah.
So and this is, and I say this is 100% from what we're doing with our lifestyles. And so I call this, I call it insulin inflammation restriction strategies. And the reason why, and I tell my patients, I didn't invent this. I have my website. So
I just want to, because as you can see, he is so passionate. Leon is so passionate about, and it comes to a point like, he's a retina specialist. So a lot of his patients are diabetic.
Yep.
Yes.
Because so he sees people who need this information.
Yeah.
And he's like, he gives it to them.
Yeah. I'm usually the first doctor who said any of this stuff to them.
And particularly with seed oils. I did a fantastic interview with Chris Kenobi last year. So he's amazing. And his work around the seed oils is very inspiring. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I call it insulin inflammation restriction strategies. And the reason why I do this is because I want them actually thinking about health in terms of hormones and in terms of inflammation. Because I want, they've been indoctrinated with, it's all energy balance. It's all, you got to eat less, exercise more, right? This is what they're being told. And I know that that's a failure. Because I did that. And that, it works some and then it stops working. But when you start thinking about your health and fitness in terms of what these hormones, which are literally telling your body what to do. Insulin is telling your body, I tell people, look around to go to any health club and you see people working very hard and yet they stay the same size. Why? Because they don't know that that hour that they just spent on the treadmill, when they get off the treadmill and they drink the fruit smoothie, insulin basically says you're going to store fat. And it doesn't matter that you just spent all that time on the treadmill, but they don't know this, so I'm trying to get my patients to think in terms of these hormones. If you get these hormones to do what they're supposed to do, and I'll also sort of touch on other things like, tell them that, your hormones tell you whether you're hungry or full as well. I mean, it's all of this stuff. Okay. So I said, so think about this more hormonally, not just a matter of calories in, calories out, energy balance. I got to work this off. I said, no. And then I show them my before and afters. I show them because, first of all, when I come in the room and they see me, usually they don't believe I'm old enough to do what I do, and they ask my age and I tell them and they can't believe it. And then, when we get on this topic and I tell them about I was obese, hypertensive, and I had a pulmonary embolism.
And then you also have the patients who hadn't seen you, who are coming back.
No, my repeat patients, right?
Yeah, recurring patients who had seen him when he was, 60, 70 pounds heavier, and now come back and it's like, oh my God, what happened?
Right.
You look great. What happened?
Right. And so, I always say, do you really want to know? And then I tell them, but actually, they appreciate it because they've never heard this before. And I told them, I said, well, don't feel bad. I'm a physician. I never heard this before. And I said, but my passion is that I don't want someone to have a pulmonary embolus or a stroke or a heart attack to have that make them be the why they learn about this stuff. I want them to learn about this stuff before that happens. Okay. As I said, I was just lucky that it wasn't big enough to completely close off my lungs and kill me, because I actually know people that's happened to. Within a minute, we're dead from this. But I got a second chance. And so I'm trying to educate my patients. I'm trying to educate all my family and friends, random people on Facebook. I'm trying to educate people because I don't want them to go through what I went through.
Us here in New Zealand, we definitely need the education.
Yes.
Can I just ask a question, which I think is really important? You keep talking about nutrient-dense foods, okay? And in New Zealand, we have a really strong anti-meat lobby. We have this absolutely huge push for veganism, all the broccoli and the spinach, and eat it raw because it's even better for you. Would you talk about what you mean when you talk about nutrient-dense foods?
Oh, okay. Well, all right. So, again, I'll just refer to them as my heroes. Then when I say my heroes, I mean Gary Taubes, Nina Kaya-Colts, Paul Mason, Jason Fung, Ken Berry, Gary Fettke. And if I'm missing anyone, you're in there. But again, when the science was explained to me, it made such perfect sense. Like, for example, let's take vitamin A. All right. Humans, that's an essential nutrient. And when we say essential, we mean that your body doesn't make it, it has to have it. And if it doesn't, you get sick and will die. Okay. So that's what makes something truly essential. And so retinol is an essential nutrient. We're not very good at making it. Now, if you eat a lot of carrots, and this is a myth that we all grew up believing that, that carrots, with vitamin A, so it'll make you have better eyesight and all that. But anyway, but no, carrots have beta carotene. Okay. And so beta carotene can be converted to retinol, which is with the vitamin A that we actually need. Okay. But humans are terrible at doing that. Okay. So you would have to eat a ton of carrots and you might still not get the amount of retinol that you need. However, cows with their 4-chambered stomachs are excellent at converting beta carotene to retinol. And so the cow is basically an excellent food processor because they process the foods into the essential nutrients that we need. And when we eat them, we can get all the retinol we need. So you eat beef liver. For me, the only things that I would even say come close to being what I would call superfoods are all animal based. They're things like beef liver, oysters, mollusks. Things that are where you can get the nutrient in the form that you need it.
That your body is
and very easily digestible. So that's the other thing. People don't understand that it doesn't matter if a food is loaded with something if you can't digest it and get it into your blood system. Okay, so that's what we mean by bioavailable and bioavailable form and nutrient density. So I've seen all.
I just preach all the time. So thanks for explaining that. And there's so many misconceptions about what's available from plant foods. B12.
Right. Oh yes.
And then just going back to touching on your point about we've evolved over 6 million years and we've evolved to eat those animal foods. And if we'd evolved to eat plant foods, we would have a different biology and a different chemistry system. So
right.
But yes, also here in the United States, there's also the big push for the big anti-meat lobby. I think it's all over the Western world where they're trying to influence us to demonize meat.
Right.
yes.
And glorify plant-based food.
Mm.
So
well, it's a shame, but and listen, I definitely am on board with ethical farming and regenerative, all that stuff. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
But the science is what it is.
Yeah.
And the science to me is clear. It could not be more clear. Humans evolved eating animals. Humans absolutely could not have evolved eating heart healthy vegetable oils because they literally didn't exist before 1866, with the invention of cottonseed oil, whose original purpose was to lubricate machinery, and it should have stayed that way. But to me, it's just like, it's absurd that we, and including medical students, including doctors, actually think that this food that just came on the scene 150 years ago is healthy for us, and the saturated fat that we literally evolved consuming is what's killing us. That doesn't make any kind of sense, and especially as you said, you've spoken to Chris Kanavi, and I think that data is so compelling, that just when just things that also another Tucker Goodrich. He's another brilliant. Brilliant thing. And then you hear these things like how Asian women just didn't used to get breast cancer. That just didn't happen. And then within one generation, their rates are the same as ours. Our leading causes of death were unheard of. And this I know. They quoted Sir William Osler. We both actually went to Johns Hopkins, and Sir William Osler is like one of the founders of that school and all. So we know all about him. And we heard him describing heart attacks as like this rare thing, and they knew what it was. It wasn't that they didn't know how to diagnose it. It was just something that didn't happen that often. It was a rare event, and now it's our leading cause of death in the United States. Well, I guess not an accidental death, but it's and cancer rates and all of these things that have exploded in frequency. And I remember this video I saw Nina Teichholz present, where she showed food consumption and production data that shows, and she made this point, and it's undeniable. Basically, all of the dietary guidelines that came in the 1980s, the food consumption and production data proves that we followed them. Everything they said to eat more of, we're eating more of. Everything they said to eat less of, we're eating less of. So we're eating less red meat, we're eating less saturated fat, we're eating more plant-based foods, we're eating more of their heart-healthy oils. And during that same time, the rates of metabolic syndrome and all the diseases of civilization have skyrocketed. Now, if those guidelines were correct, that at most the curve should have flattened. Okay, but the fact that it shot up is showing that these things are way off base.
And it's interesting. I've been an anesthesiologist. I graduated from medical school in 1992, and in that it's going to be 30 years. In the span, I'm in a unique position, is that as an anesthesiologist, I meet so many different patients. I have access to every patient's medical history, medication list, health, surgical history, and just to see the evolution of the patients that I see. 25 years ago, rare to see someone with sleep apnea. So common now. 30 years ago, rare to see.
Well, wait, one little context. Right. She's working at an outpatient surgery center. So these are like these people are going to be healthier.
Right, exactly.
So that's why I say, so
right,
these are people who are quote.
These are and an outpatient surgery center. These are, so they're not sick. These are your average people you see in the, in their local supermarket who are going in for their colonoscopies or their knee arthroscopies or, straightforward surgeries. So, but sleep apnea, hardly saw anybody with sleep apnea then, all the time. BMIs over 30, rare, all the time now. I mean, all the time.
Striking, yeah.
Hypertension, coronary and type 2 diabetes.
Oh, great.
It's just, and so I've seen the evolution of how sick we've come. People coming in with medication lists with 10 different drugs on them. Just incredible. And I would say this is more recent phenomenon. I would say over the past couple of years. Well, statins, almost everybody was on a statin. But now what I'm seeing are people who are healthy. So normal blood pressure, no history of diabetes, normal weight, but on a statin.
And I'm seeing it too.
On a statin. I'm like, and I asked him, why are you taking the statin? And he said, oh, because my doctor said my cholesterol is high. No other medication. So it seems as though, even though there's no evidence, that they are now trying to use statins for primary prevention.
I guess, yeah.
Even though there's no study whatsoever. And again, that's a recent, I've seen people who hypertensive, obese, sleep apnea, who come with a statin, but now I'm seeing healthy people. They're on no medication except a statin. And that's just telling me now pharmaceutical companies now want to expand their reach, their base. Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your take on the underlying cause of heart disease, the blood pressure, the insulin, the inflammation.
Mm-hmm. Well, this gives me a chance to name drop one other person, Malcolm Kendrick.
Yep.
I read his book, The Clot Thickens, and I was like, where was this guy when I was in medical school?
Yeah.
I mean, it just made such perfect sense. He gave this analogy about how a pebble and a can of beer have nothing in common, okay? But how they can both cause a dent in your car or like a scratch in your car, right? And he says, but if you look at the pebble and you look at the can, you're never going to find anything about them that's the same, right? But it's not about what they are; it's about what they can do. And to me, that was just like, that's just brilliant. And then everything made sense to me about what's causing heart disease. It's not about what it is, it's what can it do, okay? So he shows, and then in his book, I mean, which I think is brilliant, and he's very funny, very, very engaging, nice, fun sense of humor. So it was actually a fun read where I learned, I felt like this was more valuable than my whole medical education, I felt, well, except for, retina, because I do that, but for body medicine, I
should buy copies of that book and send it to every GP I know.
It's and the thing is, because it makes perfect sense. Right. And here's the thing, this is, he basically pointed out, like when he talked about sickle cell patients, okay, why do they get heart disease at a young age? Well, if you're shooting spiky blood cells out of your aorta at high pressure, and that's it's basically spearing into your cardioendovascular epithelial cells, that's going to damage it. That's how it does it. So he basically said that the things that cause heart disease are things that are either going to damage your blood vessels directly, or are going to inhibit or maybe make you form more clots, or inhibit your body's ability to regenerate the endothelial cells. But basically, it has to do something to the blood vessel. It has to do something to that process. And here's the thing, LDL cholesterol does none of those things. It does nothing. It literally, I've actually been telling people hypercholesterolemia is not a disease, and it should not even have an ICD-10 code. It is not a disease. And then David Diamond, yes, I'm glad I got to mention his name too, because I watched his things, and here's the thing, we all grew up thinking that familial hypercholesterolemia, that these people were all dying young and all. And I come to find that because David Diamond read the papers and actually went further than just going beyond what the thought leaders told us and said, no, it's actually only a subgroup of people with FH who die young. and they're the people who have the same risk factors of everyone else who's dying of heart disease. So if they have metabolic syndrome, or if they have a coagulopathy, or clotting disorder, yeah, then those are the ones who die in their 30s. But if they don't have those things, they live as long as everyone else, and their mortality is lower after the age of 60. And I'm watching this and I'm like, this isn't what I was taught. But, and I present this to my colleagues, and I get either one of two responses from them. I mean, of course, they can't believe it, but after one of two responses, one was just like, yes, this makes perfect sense, I'm on board. Or two, oh, okay, I'll have to check the references and all that, whatever. And then I never hear from them again.
And then
okay. But that to me, that I think basically you asked what causes cardiovascular disease, that book, that tells you what causes cardiovascular disease. Basically, damage your endothelial cells. If you damage your endothelial cells, and we know high blood sugar damages endothelial cells, hypertension does it. Basically, the things I had, the high blood pressure, I'm probably inflamed.
High triglycerides, but not high cholesterol, which I think is something.
Exactly. And so, it makes perfect sense. And here's the thing: when I ask people who are so invested in this cholesterol hypothesis, I said, how do you explain why in all of these studies it is among the lowest hazard ratios of all of, why, diabetes, your risk is 10 times higher. Why is the thing that basically has the weakest statistical association, how is that driving everything when all of these things, just having a belly raises your risk, 400%. I mean, how is that? How do you explain that? How do you explain that in any way that makes sense? Then Malcolm Kendrick breaks it down even further and shows that, he made this statement that basically if cholesterol was doing what they say it's doing, you wouldn't be living like this for decades. You'd probably die within a week. When cellular integrity is lost, when cells can't control what gets in them or what gets past tight junctions, when you have that kind of breakdown, that's not compatible with life. And again, that makes perfect sense. That's why we have tight junctions. That's why we have cellular receptors. So if cholesterol, but there's the other thing that just never made any sense to me. And someone actually made this very comment in response to I think my initial post on LMHR. They said, it never made sense to me that something that largely your body just manufactures itself is killing you. Right. And I was like, of course, that makes perfect sense. I mean, your liver is making LDL cholesterol. You're not getting it from your diet. I mean, your liver's making this stuff. How is it that your liver just decides to make this thing that is just going to slowly make your cardiac vessels close off? It doesn't make any sense. But of course, it makes perfect sense because it's not doing that, So yes, this is
fascinating. I interviewed Professor Ronald Krauss last year. Are you aware of him? Professor Krauss. So he's been involved with the American dietary guidelines, and he designed, the subtraction, the cholesterol subtraction tests and things like that. So and so he had a very early on, it was all about saturated fat and, all your health. And he's still a little bit that way. He's not totally convinced, but he's still a bit that way. But anyway, his lab did some research expecting to prove that eating saturated fat would increase the small, dense, lipoprotein particles. And they found exactly the opposite, of course. They found wheat. And he said they were just blowing.
Right.
I have literally done this experiment.
Yeah,
I'm serious. I've done. I mean, because I actually we have in the States you can buy anything. So you can basically even if you're just a civilian, you can buy labs because for the right price. So I actually from every few months I actually check these numbers. Right. And then I ordered this heart healthy panel. Basically, this heart healthy panel one gives you all your lipid numbers. It also does the LPIR score. Okay. Right. And it tells you the small dents. Yeah. And here's the thing, when you see my labs, everything's in boldface. Oh, total cholesterol is like almost 500. LDL is like, oh, you're going to die and everything. But my LPR score is in the lowest rate. I mean, it just says less than 25. And, and the range is supposed to be like, if it's over 90, you worry about it. So it's like, every time it says less than 25. My small dents, less than 90. The reference range where they start worrying about it's like 500 and something. All right. But those are not in boldface. You know, my triglycerides, usually like 40, 45. My HDL, you know, usually 90. But the thing that there was like, oh, you're going to die of a heart attack because of these LDL numbers. But then when you look at that, at the list of hazard ratios, everything that is above 2.0, every single one of those, I am like passing with flying colors. I mean, LPIR is like 640% or 6.4 hazard ratio. All right. And diabetes, I'm not diabetic. That's like 10.71. Triglycerides is over 400. I mean, you just go through that whole list, and every single one of those.
LDL like 2.2.
Yeah. And just LDL-C is 1.38. So here's the thing.
Yeah, really
1.38, not even over 2. And I got this way by purposely eating fat. I mean, I went from eating lean meats to eating the fat, like the fat that I used to trim off, I eat that. I purposely, like I'll eat ribeye steaks and I eat the whole thing. I do not trim the fat, like when you get a New York strip and you know that there's that cone of fat at the top, I always eat that. I make a point of eating that. I eat cheeses, the fattiest cheeses. And this, my numbers, my LPIR, my being super low, my A1C being like 5.2 to 5.3. I mean, all of these things. And, never getting sick, never getting arthritis, all of these things. If the price that I have to pay for this body feeling this good and having all these other markers, which put me at very high risk for heart disease, if the cost of that is raising a factor that is 1.38, I think it's worth it.
I've got the ApoE44 gene, and I guess I'm also lean mass hyperresponder. My total cholesterol is about 17 and my LDL cholesterol is 14. So it puts me up there around the 500-600s.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But here's the thing. I tell people this. I mean, even if you had like the LPA gene and you have that, here's the thing. I still think everyone is going to get the most value out of metabolic fitness. Okay. Because there are some things you can't control. Like you can't control your family history. All right. You can't control whether you have high levels of LPA. Apparently that's thought to just be genetic. But
although they are changing.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, now. Yeah.
Okay. But let's just say for the sake of argument that you can't control it. But here's the thing. To me, and that's why I think the Kendrick book is like should be like dispensed through medical schools, because it makes you think about what you're trying to accomplish here. Your main goals is that you want to make sure that you make your body an environment that does not damage your blood vessels. Okay. Because if you do that, yes, some things are going, like if you have a more clotting thing, that's going to put you at risk and stuff. But if you're not, the main thing you need to not be doing is damaging your blood vessels. And if you do that, I'm convinced that even if you had some LPA floating around, you're still going to live longer if you're not have that LPA plus your high blood pressure damaging your blood vessels or high blood sugar damaging your blood. And this is what I think, when David Diamond showed that people with FH live normal lifespan, this is how it made it so clear to me, is that, if you have a lot of LDL floating around and you're damaging your blood vessels, then you're probably going to die in your 30s. But if you don't, you're probably going to live as long as anybody else. And so it goes back to what Malcolm Kendrick was saying about what can these things do? Even if you have a coagulopathy, if you never damage your blood vessels, you're not going to form a clot just because you're prone towards clotting. Almost always you have to have something inciting an injury. So for anyone, no matter what your genes or what your subtype or whatever, still metabolic fitness is the most impactful thing that you can do. And the hazard ratios all show it. You go down that list of what raises your risk the most, and then you look at what they all
smoking,
Right, exactly. I mean, those are the things that you can do, and they jack up your hazard ratio. And again, Malcolm Kendrick, in his book, he shows you what is it that these things actually can do which causes them to have such a high hazard ratio. And in every case, they're actually doing something to you, you know? So if you can change your lifestyle where, you know, like, for example, by me not being hypertensive, now I'm not, at least my blood pressure isn't damaging my endovascular cells. At least that's not happening. There might be something else, but it's not that.
I really love the way you worded that. I think that's really powerful for people to take away, that if they just keep thinking about how is what I'm doing affecting the health of my blood vessels, like every decision you make.
Right.
You know, it's gives you a real clear pathway for making decisions.
Right. Because I think too much of medicine and too much of medical information is what I call magic bullet. Oh, do this one thing and this will, eat this food, red meat will give you cancer. I mean, it's all like this one thing does that. And it says, no, you want to try and start thinking about this in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of what is this thing, first of all, what is this thing actually capable of doing? Okay, so for things like high blood sugar, we know what that's capable of doing. We know what high blood pressure is capable of. We know what sickle cells are capable of doing. You know, I mean, we understand these things. So whether you eat blueberries or not, that's irrelevant. What's relevant is, it's not what I'm eating, it's what it actually does to my blood vessels. And so, like this thing with saturated fat, I mean, I think that's a fun story you told us about, Dr. Krause, because as I said, I've done that experiment and I eat so much saturated fat now, yet my LPIR is very low. Yeah. My triglycerides are super low. My HDL is very high. I mean, so, I've done the experiment, maybe I'll publish it, but that's what we now need to think about. And that's again, why I call it insulin inflammation restriction strategy, because I want them thinking more big picture. Don't think, oh, I gotta not eat this or I gotta eat that. No, just think about what I'm doing, what is it going to do to my insulin? What's it going to do to my growth hormone? And literally that's how I went from 161 to 175 without gaining any body fat. Just they said you could make your growth hormone spike if you fast, and if you train in a fasted state, you could build muscle. Tested that hypothesis, it's totally true. You can, so try and think in terms of more big picture things. It's not one magic bullet thing that's going to help you. And just one other thing I want to talk about just briefly, because there's a lot of things like, there's fat acceptance, fat phobia. There's a lot of people talking about things like, the psychology of eating and eating disorders. And here's the thing, I don't discount any of the validity of those things. But one thing I say to people about food, and about like psychology and all, I said, there's no way to have a healthy relationship with bad food. Okay. So before, I know people have eating disorders and all, but if you're eating bad foods, there's no healthy way to eat bad foods. And so it's not just a matter of someone counseling and telling you, oh, you're doing this from trauma and stuff. I mean, and I'm not saying that's not valid, but if you're still eating potatoes and rice and stuff and jacking up your insulin, all the psychology in the world is not going to do anything for those insulin spikes. All the psychology in the world is not going to do anything for if you're eating processed foods that have vegetable oils, which we know are oxidized and become toxic aldehydes. So it's and then as far as fat acceptance and fat phobia, well, again, Chris Canavi and Tucker Goodrich, and when they show these indigenous populations, and no one's overweight. And I think Tucker Goodrich, in one of his interviews, he talked about this. This was very funny. I think it was maybe he was talking to Paul Saladino, and it might have been the Hasda trial. And they were talking about how everyone is just lean, healthy, but there was one woman who was obese. And they asked one of the people, like, well, what's going on here? He says, oh, she hangs out with the missionaries. Yeah. She's eating their food, right? So what I'm saying is that I'm definitely not for fat shaming. Definitely not. But I am also completely against fat acceptance. I do not think that you should accept being fat unless you definitely have, Cushing syndrome or something. I mean, if you have because I am convinced that the overwhelming majority of obesity is a direct product of the foods we eat. the seed oils, the processed foods, and all these things. It's not psychology. I mean, yes, I'm sure that plays a role too. And I absolutely understand why a lot of times obese people can feel like things are hopeless because they're doing everything the doctor said to do and they don't lose any weight. So now they feel hopeless and now they blame themselves. And then if they feel hopeless, they're like, oh, maybe I'm just supposed to be obese, but the thing is, if they grew up eating what the Maasai tribe was eating, they wouldn't be obese. I'm convinced of that.
I really like Dr. Phil Maffetone. Have you come across his work? He talks about being overfat, and I really like that, although it's not a commonly used phrase, but he talks more about body composition and being overfat. And so, Tamora, you know how you said you were skinny, your arms and legs were skinny and you're tall, but you had this visceral fat around that midsection. And that's where measuring your weight, doing your waist to height ratio, because there's plenty of people out there who are skinny fat.
Oh, yeah.
Well.
Actually, my height, my waist to height ratio was greater than 0.5. It was 0.5.
Yeah.
So I was definitely in that range where
so you were in the overfat range.
Yes.
Even though you weren't obese.
No, I think my BMI was completely normal. Yeah. Because of my height. Mm-hmm. But in all my weight and things, I ended up losing 7 inches off my weight, my waist. Yeah. 7 inches off my waist just by when I, did the time restricted eating and intermittent fasting.
I feel like if we were to talk about overfat and using overfat and that waist to height ratio as our marker, that would take away a lot of the fat shaming as well, because, sure, people may not want to have big thighs and legs and buttocks, but that's not really the health risk that we're talking about.
True.
There's some hormonal things going on there perhaps, but so I think if we could really concentrate on the health risks of
right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But my point is just that I think the only shame around being fat, at least in my mind, that belongs to our thought leaders and our food industry. And our dietary guidelines. To me, that's where the shame belongs. And as I said, and that's why I told you how personally it just made me see things become much more empathetic, because as I said, I did everything right. If I ended up that way, then and now I know that what they're telling us to do was wrong. How can you then blame these people? And it's the other thing I know is that these people, if they were eating ancestral diets like those populations that Chris Canavi studies, that Paul Saladino studies, if you just took them and just put them there, they wouldn't be fat unless they hung out with the missionaries. But other than that, So this is a very important thing for us.
Really, it's very clear in New Zealand, because we've had sort of Western food in New Zealand for say 200 years, and it's changed dramatically in the last 50 to 70 years. And our Māori population have been decimated by the introduction of these foods, because there's been they haven't had a few million years to genetically adapt.
Right.
And we had, Western A. Price came here in the 1920s, I think, funded by the government. And, he described Māori as being, tall, athletic, intelligent, like really capable, beautiful faces, amazing teeth structure.
They were eating real food.
And then he did a comparison with those who had moved into the cities, a bit like the missionaries, and had started consuming a European diet, and their health was just decimated. And 100 years later, it's just a tragedy, really. Which is supported by the government and the food industry and the Heart Foundation and the diabetes.
That's where the shame belongs.
In
my mind, that's where the shame belongs.
We have the Life Education Trust that goes around the schools educating teachers, vegan diets, eat your healthy grains and cereals, eat your processed foods because it's got added vitamin B in it. So much more I could talk to you about, and we've been going for nearly an hour and a half, and there's so many questions I could ask. I just would quickly like to just touch on, maybe if you've got a couple more minutes, Tamora, about women's health and menopause and things like that. That's a huge question I get all the time.
Well, I'm not an expert in women's health or the hormones. I mean, I can just talk about my experience and what things that I know is that, so I am postmenopausal. I've been postmenopausal for 7 years. And when you told me you had no postmenopausal symptoms, I was completely jealous, because that was certainly was not the case with me. The thing that was just the night sweats. And that was horrible. That was.
But you weren't doing this stuff back then, right?
They started, yeah. And so 7 years ago, and the waking up in the middle of the night, just completely drenched, having these hot flashes, like every couple hours, where it felt like a hot poker was in my chest, and it would spread up into my face and then down into my body. Thankfully, over time, it has improved tremendously, even before I started doing low carb. I can still have them, not at the frequency that I used to, and not the extent of the heat that I would feel in my body. Whether or not it's just improving because it's improving, or because of my diet, I don't know. I don't know.
I think one of the symptoms women really get distressed about is that increasing waistline. So it's wonderful to hear how you've recovered from that.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, then, yeah, because yes, I would say that's when the waistline started happening, was perimenopausal, yes, postmenopausal, and to the point where I was congratulated for my upcoming
for our third child.
So but it's not, I've been able to, once I lost, so it's been 30 pounds. Initially, the 10 pounds just by cutting out the junk food that was offered at work, that was 10 pounds. And the other 20 pounds were just by doing time restricted eating, and then eliminating low carb diet.
And real food.
And that's the other thing. Yes, I would say real food.
Women are often say they don't like meat, they don't want to eat meat. I'm pretty sure that this has been a fixation that they've just grown up with, thinking that it's not good for them. Right. What are your thoughts about the importance of meat and fat in a woman's diet?
Very important. I can say I don't eat the diet that he eats, because he is more carnivore, but I am, the only carbs I have would be coming from vegetables. I actually like broccoli. So I do eat broccoli. I will have green beans from time to time, and asparagus, but I do not eat those every day.
And you don't eat them to like.
Oh, no. They are on the side. My diet is protein first. That is the main part.
And fat,
protein with its fats, and a little side of green vegetables. I do eat berries.
Yep.
I do eat Greek yogurt.
Yes.
Full fat.
No, everything full fat.
Everything full fat.
There's no
low fat.
There's no fat. All full fat. But actually, again, we're both in our 50s, and protein is so important in terms of building muscle. As you get older, again, another things I see in my work is we have so many the wrist fractures. That's probably the most common fracture that I see as an anesthesiologist, and they're women who fell and they fractured the wrist. You need to have the muscle, you have to have the bone strength in order to survive your older age. So protein is so important. Eating full fat foods are so important. So I think it's something that you have to be eating in the broccolis, and that's just for taste and for variety.
And variety.
For variety, but in terms of sustenance and growth, muscle is important to have protein and fat. Protein is so important.
And
fat is important.
Yeah, but
real fat is so important.
But if you're both, that's the other thing. I also do resistance training.
Yeah.
So so resistance training, because I want to build the muscle.
Yeah.
And to be there when I'm an elderly person. If I fall down, I'm able to pick myself right back off the ground.
And how many times a day do you eat, Tamora?
I eat either twice or once.
Once or twice a day.
But it's usually, I would say most of the time I will have lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
And there occasionally I do fast. I fast. I do at least one 36-hour fast a week.
Yeah.
We do a 72-hour fast once a quarter.
Yeah.
And I do like my daily time restricted eating, where I might go from 11 to, I want to finish no later than 5 o'clock.
Right.
So try and finish early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware with Dr. Jem Nadas.
No. No.
Okay, I'll send you a link because it's
great.
brilliant video. But this was another thing that emphasized the timing. It was some information he was talking about fasting, and then there was another one, Sachin the science of time restricted feeding. And again, it just, he basically showed how not just in rats but also in humans, they did an experiment with time restricted feeding, and they just used their iPhones, and all they were doing was just, they would stop eating at this certain time, and like the results, like after 30 days, their blood pressure went down, they felt way better. I mean, no other changes in their diet, and they were compliant because all they had to do was just mark in their iPhone when they stopped eating. So it wasn't like any major change. And then Dr. Jem Nadas, who talks about this, he was talking about. I actually made a clip of video clip of him talking about this, how he was saying how, we evolved a certain way over 2 million years. And he actually said how many generations, 2 million years. And he says it's 100,000 generations. Okay. Wow. 100,000 generations of if you say, like humanity for 2 million years, maybe it's longer, but still 100,000 generations. He said, we've only had agriculture for 600. And he says, and the way things we're doing now, with modern, foods and everything, said that's only 10 generations. So he said, we evolved over those first 100. He said it was just funny the way he said it, and I'll send you a link, but he basically said that if sure, maybe in another 1,000 generations, we may evolve to adapt to the kind of foods and lifestyles that we're having now. He said, but right now, he says, you don't stand a chance. I mean, you're trying to fight against 100,000 generations that designed our physiology the way it is, how often we eat, what time we eat, and all this. You're trying to take 100,000 generations of that and radically change that in the last 10. He said, and that is a big reason why you're seeing basically, we've gotten to the top of the food chain. We don't really die so much from things like cholera or plague and stuff. Now the things that are killing us are our own lifestyles, and so, it was just brilliant, and that's how I want people to be thinking about this stuff. I wanted people to think about this big picture wise, thinking about it in terms of evolution. What were humans, what did we evolve doing? Why do we even make insulin in the first place? When I tell my patients this, it blows them away because it makes so much sense. I tell them the whole reason we make insulin is because for most of our time, we could not eat all the time. And insulin is what allowed us to survive food precariousness, food not being able to pick up a phone and have food delivered, basically catching that critter, but then maybe not eating for several days, maybe even weeks. That's the whole reason we make insulin. So we didn't make insulin to be constantly triggering it and spiking it in enormous quantities. Like for example, dietitians tell people that they need to be eating all the time to keep their energy up. That's insanity. That makes and they tell this to diabetics. They should eat a bunch of small, frequent meals because somehow you're going to run out of energy. Why do we even make insulin if not to store energy? But they're like telling them to do the opposite. And this is, they're saying, well, why do we become insulin resistant? Well, I think the answer is quite clear, because we're making way too much of it way too often for decades. So of course we're going to become insulin resistant. That's just how human body physiology works. When you overstimulate, it's the same reason we become insulin. Why we have addiction. If you're stimulating those dopamine receptor, whichever. If you overstimulate something, eventually it's going to downregulate the receptor. You're going to become resistant to it. Yep. It's the same thing with insulin. But dietitians are like, no, but your energy level. And here's the thing: when I tell people that I eat, between 4 to 6 meals a week, and of course they're like, how can you do that? You're insane to me. I tell them this. I said, I'm not lying to you. it is actually easier for me to do this than it used to be for me to miss a meal in my old life. And I said, now I know that's hard for you to understand, but you have to understand that when you've made the kind of changes I've made, you've changed everything. You know, it's not that I changed my habits. It's that I've literally changed the hormones that tell me I'm hungry, that tell me I'm full. I've changed the hormones that tells my body to make muscle. If I train in a fasted state, my growth hormone is higher, I build muscle. And I've been able to maintain this. So I said, so if you can actually live your lifestyle that gets your hormones to do the positive things for your body the way it was designed to do, and not like just be spiking out insulin, which tells your body to store fat, which you never burn because 3 hours later you're eating again. Instead of doing that, if you're doing something like what I'm doing, which is what humans were designed to do, then all these other things change. Now you're not hungry, but you don't have to be eating every 3 hours to not be hungry, you know? And then of course, if you eat the kind of foods that I eat, you know, that are incredibly nutrient dense, calorie dense, saturated fat dense, all these things, you're not going to be malnourished. So I said, you have to think big picture. You know, I mean, no one's going to tell you that tomorrow you should start eating 4 meals a week like I do. That would be insane. I didn't even do that. And actually most weeks now it's pretty much 5 to 6 meals, but I'm just saying that would be insane. But understand that if you change these things, your body changes with you and it adapts to these things. And not only that, you're actually putting your body in a state that is more natural with how the way to evolve. I tell people this, I said that humans evolved as obligate intermittent fasters on a high fat, low carb diet. And then I explained to them because that was literally all that was possible prior to agriculture. You did not have high carbohydrate foods because we hadn't yet invented them through selective breeding. You know, the corn was teosint, so that's what you ate. That was low carb. I said you ate animals, that was your high fat, and you weren't eating that often because, as I said, you couldn't. No one was that good a hunter. No one was that good a gatherer that you could be eating and snacking all day long. So this is how we literally evolved. And think of it that way. Then you're trying to redefine what you consider normal. All right. I said your goal is to develop a new normal, a normal that keeps you fit. Right now, what I do feels completely normal to me, feels every bit as normal than what I used to do with calories in and calories out. Actually, that didn't feel normal. And that's why people always yo-yo, because nothing feels more abnormal than counting how many peanuts you can eat and how many calories you can eat. You know, for most of human history, we didn't even know what a calorie was. But the whole idea that you have to be, you know, oh, I got to exercise this much to burn this much. No one can live like that. It's not normal. Okay. And I don't live like that. I eat until I'm full every single time. I don't do portion control. I work out all the time and I feel normal. So just try and find a new normal.
Well, you both look absolutely amazing. You're really, you're really walking your talk there. You look vibrant and healthy and energetic. Would you just share where people can find you, and I'll just have a quick chat with you after I stop the recording so I can get all those details, because I do like to make sure that I share everything so the audience can track you down.
He will share.
Okay, well, I have a dedicated page on my website. I mean, you know, it's www.retinasurgeon.net. RETINASURGEON.net. Okay, but if you go there, there's a section that you click about, you know, insulin inflammation strategies for better health, and there I have links to pretty much all of the people I've talked about, all of who I call my heroes, my lifesavers. You know, I have links of Paul Mason and Gary Taubes, Nina Teicholz, Tucker Goodrich. I mean, all of it. I have videos and, you know, with titles about what they're about. And then in the second section, I have my link to Facebook posts that I write, because I write on social media, on Facebook, you know, pretty much weekly. I just write my experiences, my insights. I write things that are challenging that, you know, a lot of my friends are physicians too, and I want them to be seeing this stuff. So just what my experience has been. So that's in the second section, and I'm always adding to this list as well. So that's where you can find my things. And I just joined the LMHR group on Facebook as well, so people have seen that as well. But that's what I do.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much once again. You've been amazing. This has just gone by in a whiz for me. So yeah, thank you. And I'll send you a copy once it's all been processed.
Okay, all right.
Very good. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Thanks for letting us share our story.